accountability. So I decided in this series just to dip into some of the very small pieces of what we'll be expanding on and what we'll be actually doing, because being visible is an inside job. So your ability to show up and to be visible and to put yourself out there is actually, because it's an inside job, it's actually sometimes how to be, not necessarily what to do. But there are pieces of it. So I'll share that all with you. So I'm going to crack on. I have got my notes here, and more importantly, my timer here, just in case the timer in front of me goes. If I drop out for any reason, stay where you are. I'll be straight back. Make for an interesting recording, I guess. And just to say that yesterday I covered 6 important components for iconic clarity. And the reason that I did that was because those components are actually the thing that I see the most, whether the client is an individual, whether they are a corporation, whether they are a business, big, small, or SME, kind of somewhere in the middle. One of the reasons why people remain or don't remain consistent and fall off the wagon is usually because they didn't have clarity in these 6 components. Now, I went through a lot of information yesterday, and I went through the first 4 of them deeply. I told you what all 6 were, but I'm just going to pick up where we left off, cover the last 2, and also give you some extra juicy stuff as well, around like when life throws you. Because if you're being visible online, for example, and you write a post or you share a video and people become critical of it or even troll you for it, then that will normally do the job of knocking you sideways. And it's the biggest reason why people don't want to go back and do that again. If you are doing stuff out in the world, maybe you're speaking, maybe you're teaching, maybe you're training, maybe you're working with a group, working with individuals, working with people that are kind of like knocking it out of the park, or working with people that aren't quite sure. One of the things that you will find is that if you get knocked, or people come back at you. So let me be clear. One of the things that the people that I work with closely say the most when it comes to either speaking or presenting or sharing something, especially even more so when it's face to face, eye to eye, is that, well, what if somebody asks me something and I don't know what the answer to that question is? What will I do? What will I say? How will I cope with it? How will I handle it? And that in itself causes a bit of spiral of a kind of a crisis of confidence, so to speak. So I always address what I call the head, the heart, and the hands. The head being the thoughts, the mindset, the way to think differently, the sort your head out stuff. The heart being the passion behind it and how you maintain that when things go up or down, either way, because if something goes up, you can be so excited and giddy that it can kind of knock you off your perch. And if things aren't working so well, that can also have a bit of a, I need to lick my wounds and get myself back up there again. So those components are really useful, but also the practical, well, what shall I do in this stage? And somebody recently asked me, so in your work, Jenny, do you coach people? Yes, I absolutely do, but I also mentor. So I use whatever's needed, the right tool for the right job. And I encourage you to do the same in what you do too. So what are we talking about today? Make sure that I haven't got yesterday's notes, that I've got today's notes. So we're talking about keeping consistent, of course, but stabilizing when our consistency and our visibility in an iconic way when life throws things at us, and also harmonizing our work. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about life-work balance. I try to stay away from balance, because balance, if you imagine it like a seesaw, it's one or the other. So either this thing here or this thing there, or, people spend their time trying to level it out. But when you harmonize it, it means you can have both. You can have high levels of each. You can have mediocre levels of each. You can have one that's high, one that's medium, but basically they're working in harmony with each other. So it's reciprocal for each other. So I like to talk about harmony, not balance. And why is this important? Well, of course it's important because when you're then sharing your work in an iconic way, people resonate. It's not about being divisive and trying to make one person do one thing and one person do another, but it's about really speaking in the language that your people hear. This is nothing to do with articulation or pronouncing things properly. If you haven't already heard, ASK in my world is arcs. That's it. It's what I say. It's how I say it. And I move on from that. It's how you share and how you share with grace. And it's important that when you share with grace, that you share with grace in a way that you share with grace, not what someone else says that you should or shouldn't do. So each of us can share with grace, but we share in our own unique way. This is super important. And the other reason why it's important is it helps, as I say, people know that they resonate with you and your work. But they also, it forms a connection, as we talked about yesterday, and it helps to engage people at the level and in the places that they need to be engaged. You meet them where they are. Important because nobody likes to be judged. And many people, despite appearances, don't like to be judgy McJudgy on other people. It causes friction and it stops that kind of connection piece. So I'm going to delve into the last two parts of what we were talking about yesterday in terms of clarity, because I think it's important. So there were two things that I spoke of. I wrote it down here so I don't forget to tell you. So when we're making an offering or an invitation, it's important to talk about, number one, what they're offering. Number two, who it's being offered to. Number three, how it's going to work. Number four, how much it is. Time, money, and other things, resources. Number four, how much it is, sorry. Number five, why they might want it or need it. And this is something that sometimes people forget to do. So I'm going to quickly go through that. I alluded to this at the start of this live. But when we think negatively and we kind of couch people and say, no, it's not for you, this isn't for you, you don't need this, and we kind of put our mark on what we think is for them, what we actually do is we get in the way of their process. It's a bit like, I remember helping somebody at a retreat, and the person speaking started to get upset. Now, having worked with people in all sorts of guises, from, kind of CEO, executive level, even to kind of junior, apprentices, people that are early career graduates and things like that, and people who are less senior in organizations as well. I'm used to people getting irked, frustrated, upset, tearful, emotional, and all sorts of things. There's no conversation too difficult for me to hear. I'll sit with that person. But the one thing that happens is if someone feels uncomfortable in themselves, they'll rush in and they'll try and placate the person, which sounds on the surface like a great thing to do. But when you do that, you take them out of their experience. And when people are going through any kind of emotional experience, whether it's deemed a good and positive emotional experience or one that's maybe not so positive, what they're doing is they're processing. So if somebody's going through their process and I jump in and stop them by saying, oh, it'll all be better soon. No, don't get upset. Don't get upset. It stops them in their process. And that's what you don't want to be doing when you are talking about why people need your work. You want to let them, allow them to process the information that you're giving. And some of them will need a few seconds, some will need minutes, some might need hours, some might sleep on it. But whatever they need, it allows them to process it. And it stops you from stopping their process. What it feels like to the person on the receiving end is that they think or want something from you, and you end up inadvertently talking them out of it. You kind of say to them, well, no, you don't need that. They don't need you. So it's a really important thing to understand why somebody wants it and why they need it. And we're going to go into that a little bit more deeply over the next couple of live streams, but then also in Iconic. And it'll be easier because you'll be able to say, these are my people, this is what I do, how do I do this? And it'll be answered live on a call.